The notification came at 6:47 in the morning. I remember the exact time because I'd been awake since 5, sitting at the kitchen table with my second cup of coffee, watching the light change over the backyard. That was something Margaret used to love. She'd pull her robe tight and stand at the sliding door and say, "Bud, look at that sky." 4 years since I lost her, and I still look at the morning sky. Old habits. My phone buzzed on the table. A text from my son. "Dad, we need you at the house this weekend. Sandra says it's important. Family meeting." That was it. No "how are you?" No "hope you're doing well." Just come, because Sandra said so. I should explain who Sandra is. My daughter-in-law married my son Marcus 8 years ago. She's the kind of woman who schedules everything, including conversations. She sends calendar invites for phone calls. I'm not exaggerating. Once she sent me an Outlook invite for Thanksgiving dinner. Subject line, "Annual family gathering. Confirm attendance." I thought it was spam. My son Marcus. He's 41 now. Looks like me around the jaw, nothing like me anywhere else. After college, he went into real estate development and did well for a few years. Then things got complicated, which is the word he uses when he doesn't want to say I made bad decisions. He and Sandra have 2 kids, my grandchildren, Lily and Owen, and they've been living in my house on Clearwater Lane, for going on 3 years. I want to be clear about that. The house on Clearwater Lane is mine. I bought it in 1987, raised Marcus and his sister Joanne there, paid it off by 2009. When Margaret got sick, we moved into a smaller place over on Ridgemont, something easier to manage. When she passed and Marcus came to me saying he and Sandra were between places, that the apartment lease was up and the new development project needed 6 more months to close, I said yes. Of course I said yes. It's what you do. That was 3 years ago. I drove out on Saturday morning. It's about 40 minutes from Ridgemont to Clearwater, through the old part of town, past the hardware store where I used to take Marcus when he was small. He'd carry the little orange basket like it was the most important job in the world. Sandra met me at the door before I even knocked. That should have told me something. "Bud," she said. She never calls me Dad. Never has. "Come in. Marcus is in the living room." The house looked different. I noticed it immediately, but couldn't name it at first. Then I realized my furniture was different. The armchair by the window, the one Margaret picked out at an estate sale in 2003, the one with the worn armrest I'd always meant to reupholster, it was gone. In its place was something modern, gray, with metal legs. I stood there for a moment looking at the space where that chair used to be. "We redecorated a little," Sandra said behind me. "It was feeling cluttered." Marcus was on the couch. He stood up when I came in, gave me a hug that lasted about 1 second, and then sat back down. Sandra sat in a new gray chair. I sat across from them on a couch I did not recognize. "Dad," Marcus started, "we've been doing a lot of thinking." Sandra put her hand on his knee. A small gesture. She does that when she wants him to stop talking so she can talk. "What Marcus is trying to say," she said, "is that this arrangement has run its course. We've outgrown the house. We need something bigger for the kids, better school district, yard space. We've been in contact with a real estate agent, and we think the timing is right to list Clearwater Lane." I heard the words. I understood them individually. But together they formed a sentence that didn't make sense yet. "List it," I said. "Yes," Sandra said. "The market's good right now. Phil, he's our agent. Phil thinks we could get 380, maybe 400 if we do some updates first. The kitchen especially." I looked at Marcus. He was looking at the floor. "Marcus," I said, "this is my house." He looked up. "I know that, Dad. So what does list it mean exactly?" Sandra shifted in the gray chair. "We've been here 3 years. We put work into this place. Time, energy, maintenance costs. We feel like we have equity here in the sense. And honestly, Bud, the house is too big for one person. You're in that little place on Ridgemont. This doesn't make sense as a use of the asset. She called my house an asset. The house where Marcus learned to ride a bike in the driveway, where his sister had her quinceanera. Yes, Margaret insisted, even though we're not Latino, because Joanne's best friend was and Joanne wanted one too, and Margaret said Joy doesn't need a reason. The house where Margaret spent the last good Christmas she had, sitting by the window in that armchair that was now apparently in a landfill somewhere. Asset. I think, I said carefully, that I need to understand what's happening here. You want to sell my house, and you expect what, exactly? A share of the proceeds? Sandra didn't blink. We'd expect to be compensated for the time invested in the maintenance contributions. Phil can help structure something fair. I stood up. Not dramatically. I just needed to be standing. I'm going to go home, I said. I need to think. Marcus finally spoke. Dad, don't make this weird. I looked at my son, 41 years old, sitting in my living room on a couch I didn't recognize, asking me not to make it weird that his wife just proposed selling my house out from under me. I'm not making anything weird, I said. I'm going home. I drove back to Ridgemont in a kind of suspended quiet. The radio was off. I took a long way past the hardware store. It was closed on Saturdays now, had been for a few years. I hadn't noticed until that moment. I didn't sleep that night. By 4 a.m, I was at the kitchen table again, yellow legal pad in front of me, making a list, not an emotional list, a practical one. What do I actually know? What do I need to find out? First, my name is on the deed. Only my name. Margaret's was removed when we refinanced in 2011, and we never added it back, which was an oversight. But now, I supposed, a useful one. Second, I had never signed anything giving Marcus or Sandra any legal interest in the property. No co-signer agreement, no equity arrangement, no contract. The understanding had always been verbal. You can stay until you get back on your feet. 3 years is a long time to be on the way back to your feet. Third, I needed to find out what Phil, the real estate agent, actually knew. Had Marcus or Sandra represented themselves as owners? Had they given Phil information that assumed ownership they didn't have? I called my neighbor Ted the next morning. Ted is 73, retired, and his brother-in-law is a property attorney named Frank Delaney, who works out of an office downtown. Ted had mentioned Frank before at a neighborhood cookout, in the abstract way you mention things you hope no one ever needs. I needed Frank. We met on Tuesday. Frank's office smelled like old wood and printer ink, the good kind of office. He was in his mid-60s, calm, with the demeanor of a man who has heard everything and is no longer surprised by any of it. I laid out the situation. He listened without interrupting. When I finished, he was quiet for a moment, then he said, "The house is in your name only." "Yes." "And you have the deed? Home safe, Ridgemont? And you've never signed anything? Lease agreement, equity sharing arrangement, any document with their names on it regarding this property?" Nothing." He nodded slowly. "Then I want you to do something for me before we go any further. I want you to pull your county property records online tonight. I'll show you how, and also check if there are any permits pulled on the property in the last 3 years. Renovations, additions, anything like that. I asked why permits mattered. Sometimes, Frank said, measured, when people plan to claim an interest in a property based on improvements, they create a paper trail first. I want to see what paper trail exists. That night I pulled the records. There was a permit pulled 14 months ago. Kitchen renovation. The applicant listed was Marcus, with his name and a signature I recognized. That wasn't the problem. The problem was that in the property notes section, the application listed the property owner as Marcus, not as the homeowner's son, not as a tenant, as the owner. I sat at the kitchen table for a long time after that. In the morning, I called Frank. He was quiet when I read him the application detail. Then, "I need you to listen carefully. Do not contact Marcus or Sandra about this yet. Do not go back to the house. I'm going to make a few calls today." I asked what kind of calls. The kind that figure out whether this was sloppy paperwork or something more deliberate. It took Frank 4 days. 4 days of me going about my life. Grocery shopping, walking, watering the plants Margaret planted along the back fence that I'd kept alive for 4 years through sheer stubbornness. 4 days of normal surface while underneath everything felt loose. Frank called on Friday afternoon. I've spoken to 2 people at the county recorder's office and a contact at a title company, he said. The permit application was the least of it. There's a document, filed 8 months ago, that appears to be a quitclaim deed transferring your property to Marcus jointly. My hand tightened on the phone. The signature on the grantor line, Frank said, appears to be yours. The room went very still. It's not my signature, I said. I didn't think it was, Frank said. I'm looking at a copy now. The notarization is from a company that, as far as I can tell, no longer has an active license in this state. We're going to need your original deed, a handwriting analysis, and a report filed with the county. I went to the home safe that night. Margaret had bought it, a heavy gray thing she'd insisted on bolting to the closet floor. For important things, she'd said. Not jewelry. Important things. The original deed was there. My name. Only my name. Dated 1987. I drove to Frank's office the next morning with the deed in a manila envelope, and I placed it on his desk, and I said, "Tell me what we do next." What we did next was methodical. Frank filed a notice of dispute with the county recorder, which effectively froze any pending transactions on the property. He contacted a forensic document examiner. He sent a formal letter, certified mail, return receipt, to Marcus at the Clearwater Lane address, notifying him that the property was subject to a legal dispute and that no transactions, transfers, or listing agreements could proceed. I asked Frank what this meant, legally, for Marcus and Sandra. At minimum, he said, filing a fraudulent deed is forgery. It's a felony in this state. I sat with that for a moment. My son, 41 years old, forged my signature on a legal document to take my house. I want to be honest about what that felt like, because I think people expect a certain kind of reaction. Rage, maybe, or dramatic confrontation. What I felt was something quieter and sadder and much heavier. Like finding out the ground you've been standing on wasn't solid all along. I thought about Marcus at 8 years old carrying that orange hardware store basket. I thought about Margaret at the end saying, "He'll find his footing, bud. He just needs more time than most." I thought about all the mornings I'd looked at that backyard sky and thought I was being patient, generous, and that it would come back to me in some form. The certified letter was delivered on a Thursday. Sandra signed for it. Marcus called me 20 minutes later. "Dad, what is this?" "It's what it says it is," I told him. "You doing this over a conversation?" "We were just talking about options, Marcus." I stopped him. "I know about the quitclaim deed." Silence. Long silence. That was just something the agent suggested for the listing process, he said finally. To simplify, "Stop," I said. "Please stop. I have the original deed. I have a forensic examiner reviewing the filing. I have an attorney. Don't say anything else right now." He hung up. Sandra called from a different number. 4 minutes later, I let it go to voicemail. I haven't listened to that voicemail yet. I don't know that I need to. Frank filed the formal complaint with the county district attorney's office the following week. He also filed a civil suit seeking an order to vacate the premises, a formal legal notice requiring Marcus and Sandra to leave the property within 30 days. Lily and Owen went to stay with Sandra's mother in Cincinnati while the situation was being sorted out. I made sure of that. I called Sandra's mother myself. We'd always gotten along. The investigation took 11 weeks. I won't make it sound faster or more dramatic than it was. 11 weeks of phone calls with Frank, of document reviews, of a meeting with an investigator from the DA's office who asked me careful questions in a gray conference room. 11 weeks of walking past Margaret's plants every morning and reminding myself that what I was doing was right. The forensic examiner confirmed what we already knew. The signature on the quitclaim deed was not mine. The notary seal belonged to a company whose license had lapsed 2 years prior. The real estate agent Phil, when interviewed, stated that Marcus had provided documentation representing himself as the property owner. Phil was cleared. He'd relied on the paperwork in good faith. Marcus was charged with forgery and filing a fraudulent document, both felonies. Sandra was not charged. Investigators found no evidence she had direct knowledge of the document filing, though, frankly, had my own views on that. The plea agreement came 6 weeks after the charges were filed. Marcus pled guilty to a reduced charge of fraudulent misrepresentation. He received 18 months of supervised probation, a fine, and a mandatory order for restitution, which in practical terms meant covering my legal fees. The felony charge was reduced to a misdemeanor as part of the agreement, contingent on completing probation without incident. I won't pretend that felt like justice in the complete sense. It didn't. It felt like a legal resolution, which is a different thing. The house on Clearwater Lane is mine again, unambiguously, every record corrected. I had the locks changed. New deadbolt, new garage code on the day Marcus and Sandra completed their move-out. I drove over and stood in the driveway for a few minutes. The kitchen had been renovated, I'll give them that. New countertops, a better layout. I didn't feel gratitude about it. I felt tired. I went through the room slowly. Margaret's armchair was gone, as I'd suspected. A few other things were different. The back bedroom where Joanne used to stay had been repainted. Not a bad color, actually. A soft gray-green. I stood in there for a while. I've been thinking about what to do with the house. I'm not sure I want to move back in. Too many versions of my life live in those rooms, and right now I need some distance from all of them. Frank suggested renting it, generating income, keeping my options open. My neighbor told me the bank was foreclosing on my house next week. I'm Robert. I'm when a do cried on the phone when I told her everything, genuinely cried in a way that reminded me suddenly and completely of Margaret. Joanne said to take my time. Don't make a permanent decision from a hurt place, Dad, she said. Wait until you're not hurt. I'm trying. Marcus and I have not spoken since the day I told him I knew about the deed. I don't know what I'll do about that. He's my son, and I love him the way you love someone who was once 8 years old carrying an orange basket and who is now someone you don't entirely recognize. Those two things coexist. I don't have a plan for how to carry them together yet. Maybe I won't for a while. Maybe that's okay. There's a thing I keep coming back to, something Frank said near the end, when the paperwork was almost done. I'd asked him how often he saw something like this. Family members, people who should know better. More than you'd think, he said, and less than the people who do it seem to imagine they can get away with. I've thought about that a lot. The confidence of it, whatever Marcus and Sandra were thinking when they filed that document. That I was old, maybe, that I wasn't paying attention, that I'd never find out, that I'd find out and be too tired or too heartbroken to fight. Whatever the logic was, they were wrong about it. I'm 68 years old. I've buried a wife and kept her plants alive for 4 years out of stubbornness and love, and the refusal to let beautiful things die if I can help it. I wake up before the sun, and I watch the light change over the backyard, and I think of Margaret standing at the sliding door. I am paying attention. I always have been. The legal matter is closed. The house is mine. My daughter calls every Sunday, and we talk too long, and I don't mind. Ted came over last week with a 12-pack, and we sat on the Ridgemont porch until it got dark, and he didn't ask me too many questions, which is the particular kindness of a good neighbor. Last Tuesday, I drove to Clearwater Lane. I parked in the driveway. I went in through the back, past Margaret's plants. They've spread, actually, more than I expected. Lavender and black-eyed Susans pushing into what used to be just grass. I sat on the back step for a long time. The sky was the kind of clear you only get in October, the kind that makes everything look cleaner than it probably is. I thought, I need to find that armchair. Estate sales, antique dealers, someone somewhere bought it. It had a specific wear pattern on the right armrest, a particular way the cushion had compressed over years of Margaret sitting in it in the mornings. I know what I'm looking for. I'll find it, and when I do, I'm going to bring it back to this house, and I'm going to put it by that window, And I'm going to sit in it and watch the light change and think about all the mornings Margaret stood at that sliding door. And I am going to be grateful for every single thing I did not let go without a fight. People ask me sometimes, not often, but sometimes, whether I feel guilty about what happened to Marcus, whether a father is supposed to protect his son even from consequences the son brought on himself. I've thought about that question more than I expected to. Here's what I've landed on. I didn't cause what happened to Marcus. Marcus caused what happened to Marcus. The moment he signed my name to a document he had no right to touch. That was his decision. Made in private, made deliberately. Made with the assumption that I either wouldn't find out or wouldn't do anything about it. That's not a mistake. Mistakes are things that happen when your judgment fails in the moment. What Marcus did required planning. It required steps. It required him to look at his father and decide I was someone he could go around. That decision had a cost, and the cost fell on him. That's not cruelty. That's just how things actually work when you strip away all the rationalizations. I've been thinking about Sandra's word, asset. She called my house an asset, which is technically accurate and completely wrong at the same time. A house you've lived in for 35 years, where your children grew up and your wife died and your whole life took its shape. Calling that an asset is like calling a photograph a piece of paper. You're not wrong about the material. You're wrong about everything else. What strikes me most looking back is how much they were counting on me being passive, old maybe, sentimental, too attached to the relationship to protect myself. And I understand the logic, I do, because I spent 3 years being exactly that, patient, generous, not asking hard questions, telling myself Marcus just needed more time. The thing I tell anyone in a situation like this, patience is a virtue until it becomes a habit of not paying attention. There's a difference between giving someone room to grow and giving someone room to take advantage. I confused those two things for a long time. I stopped confusing them the morning I sat at my kitchen table with a legal pad and started writing down what I actually knew versus what I'd assumed. That's the turn. Not the lawsuit, not Frank's office, not the forensic examiner. The turn was the legal pad. The decision to look clearly at a situation I had been deliberately not looking at clearly. Intelligence isn't about knowing things. It's about being willing to see things. And integrity isn't about being a good person in easy circumstances. It's about what you do when the person betraying you is someone you love. Do you look away because it hurts less? Or do you deal with what's actually in front of you? I dealt with it. It cost me my relationship with my son, at least for now. It cost me 11 weeks of stress and legal fees and more sleepless mornings than I want to count. It cost me some version of the story I'd been telling myself about my family. What it gave me back was my house, my name on a clean deed, and the knowledge that I am still someone who does not let go of what's his without a fight. That's not a small thing. At 68, with Margaret gone and the kids grown and the years moving the way they do, knowing that about yourself matters. It turns out to be one of the things worth keeping. I'm going to find that armchair, and when I do, I'm going to sit in it. And that's going to be enough.